Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Kim Echlin and Marci Ian.
Good evening. Here I am with my Tims. It's so lovely of you to be here. I had the distinct pleasure of meeting Kim and chatting with her on Canada AM a couple of days ago, and I was just saying, my floor manager was giving me the heave-ho because I wanted to chat with her another hour or so, and he said, wrap it up. So I'm so pleased that we can continue our conversation tonight. Kim is a wordsmith of the highest order. The characters she creates not only touch the heart, they pierce it. Just amazing. I said to her the other day, how did you create these amazing women? How did you find their voices? And we're going to chat more about that tonight, because I said, you know, to shape these experiences and to have us care about these characters the way we do with Kim's books is an extraordinary gift, an extraordinary talent. She is an award-winning author, as Yvonne mentioned, lives here in Toronto. She wrote Elephant Winter and Dagmar's Daughter and Inanna from The Myths of Ancient Summer, of course, The Disappeared that was shortlisted for the Giller. But above all, Kim's humble, and I know that in meeting you. And there's this tour de force that we're going to get to know a little bit more tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the amazing Kim Echlin one more time.
Well, thank you very much. A big thank you to Yvonne Hunter for organizing this event tonight, and to the Toronto Public Library for hosting us. A very special thank you to Emma Ingram, who has been taking care of organizing publicity and all of these events all week. She's just been superb and wonderfully well organized and keeping things calm and moving along beautifully. And a thank you to Marci, who's coming out because she is generously giving her time, and because she loves literature. It is so apparent when you talk to Marci about books. As I welcome all of you, and I know so many of you, and I thank you so much for coming out, it feels right to be here sharing this energy of a new book with friends and family and people who love stories. And I want to make a couple of special thank yous, though, because you never know when you're going to have a chance to do it again. I'd like to thank my husband, Ross Upshur, for supporting my writing all through the years, and for Sarah, who's come with me to read tonight. And there are a few people who made a special long journey through the cold to come into Toronto tonight to be part of this event. They are my mother, Madeleine Echlin, who has never missed a single book event that I've done, with my brother, Paul Echlin, with Jane Woodcock, with Gail Stringer and Martha Martin. So thank you to all of you for coming, and thank you to this special group who's come from a long way. So we can do the reading. I thought maybe what we could do is start by having a little reading so that you can hear the characters' voices. This book is told in two voices, two women's voices. The first is Masa from Karachi, Pakistan. The second is Katherine from Hamilton, Ontario. In these excerpts that you'll hear the two women's voices. You'll hear their stories about their parents, a little bit about music, and about how they first meet their lovers. So Sarah, if you would join me. All right. So, Masa.
What she is, I am. My mother ran away with my father when she was 18 years old and gave birth to me in Karachi. She had bright gray eyes that were interested in everything, especially in me and my father. From the beginning, my parents were teetering on their own brink. I did not have them for long. They were murdered when I was 13.
I got taken away from Ma when I was 3 months old. She was in the Belmont Reformatory. She got put away for living with my Chinese father, Henry Lau, in a garage on Barton Street. They said she was incorrigible. A woman could get arrested for not using the ladies and escort store at a tavern, much less sleeping with a Chinese migrant worker. The judge said, "Jenny Goodnow, your father is acting in your best interests." How was that supposed to be in her best interests, to send her pregnant to a reformatory because she wasn't married? How was that fair? Outside the courtroom, the matron said,
You're going away for 18 months. Get ready for Black Maria.
"What was that?" It sounded like spiders. It sounded like something Catholic. What's Black Maria?
The court van. You girls should get on with things. Why you go to foreigners is a mystery to me.
Ma was afraid to go back to my father after she got out. She was afraid they'd take me away again.
My parents' favorite place to go dancing was the Beach Luxury Hotel, and my father's eyes were always on my mother. My mother and I spoke Urdu and Pashto together. My father used to say, "I speak Goan," and my mother said, "There's no such thing as Goan." But then he'd sing the Falcon song.
"You're so fine, you're mine.
He'd take her in her arms, and he'd stop singing, and put his face in her hair, and kiss her neck, and they'd stop dancing for a moment. Then he'd say, "That's Goan." And my mother would look at me and say, "He's so full of hullabaloo."
It was love that he was full of. They called their only child Masa, which means like the moon.
My father used to call me Porcupine, because when I was a baby, my mother used to say,
Do you know what the porcupine sang to her baby? "Oh, my child of velvet."
At Christmas, everyone came to the party at the Beach Luxury Hotel, Hindus and Sikhs and Goans and Muslims, and I played duets with my father on the piano. His favorite was "Deck the Halls with Boughs of Holly." I did not know what Boughs of Holly was, but I thought it must be Christian.
I decked the girl at school who called me a chink and ripped my blouse. The principal said, "Katie, fighting is very unladylike." I said, I wasn't trying to be a lady. Soon I was taking the bus downtown, and one night I walked up to the Alexandric Tavern on James Street South. When the band took a break, I stepped up on stage, sat down at the piano, and I began to play. It was great. No one stopped me.
A girl needs to figure out what she wants to do. She has to have some nerve. A girl needs to take chances.
I wasn't legal yet, so I had to be invisible in plain sight. In those days, guys catcalled.
"Hey, chickie, you look good in that dress. You look better out of it."
But the band wanted me to play because I played fast as the devil. The band called back to the heckler.
"What chick? I just see a piano player."
A new guy joined the band, a tall, sexy sax player called T minor. T had an intimate way of leaning one shoulder toward me.
After my parents were killed, my uncle sold our piano, so I went to the Beach Luxury Hotel to practice. One Saturday morning, I was playing alone, and a boy came in and startled me. His eyes were shining black opals. Aunt was still with her lover, and the boy came closer.
"I like how you play. My name is Kamal."
It was the first time I'd ever been alone with a man who was not my father or my uncle.
"What's your name?"
My name is Masa.
I saw T look over at me, checking me out. Even when we were in front of an audience, I always felt as if we were alone together, T and me. Our first time was a sweet night, and I woke him up at dawn to try it again, and the second time it was very good. That night I understood why the world needs the word quenchless. Thank you.
That was beautiful.
Thank you.
So we heard Masa and we heard Katie or Katherine. Where did those voices come from, Kim? Tell us first about Masa and how she came to be.
The genesis of this novel was actually, if I can start on the Katherine side.
Sure.
The genesis of the novel was when I first heard about a law called the Female Refuges Act. And this act was the act under which Katherine's mother was arrested. And I was astonished when I found out that women could be arrested for being incorrigible as late as 1964. So that, you know, my mother, my grandmother, I was born into these laws. And when I started looking at the history, the post-war history, I saw that, you know, the pressures and resistances that were, that women had to struggle against were, in fact, very, very recent. So then, by chance, I discovered that in Pakistan, which had been very liberal and open up until the early 70s, a set of laws 10 years after the Female Refuges Act was finished came into effect, the Hudud ordinances. And these ordinances were also greatly restrictive to women's movements and their freedom in their relationships and so on. So I think what it said to me was that there are all kinds of differences, but that the resistances that these women had to fight against were not so different, even across the world.
Even across the world, and it's a world that you've traveled. And I'm thinking that has informed a lot of your writing, because you've been to Pakistan, you've been all around the world as a journalist, and even right here at home. And that's got to factor in to the way you use your pen or you type those keys and the stories come to you.
Yes, certainly. I mean, the opportunity to travel gives you a chance to hear other people's stories and to experience other cultures and so on. And we have a lot of that in Toronto. You know, you can step out your door and talk to people from all over the world, hear stories from all over the world in Toronto. But I think what happens with travel is it maybe makes you a little bit more open to hearing the stories because you've had the experience in other places.
And it really is, though, about the listening, isn't it? Because I would think we hear things all the time. We hear people say hello or goodbye or maybe how their day is going, but are we really listening? And when you listen, you really do learn.
That's so true, yes, yeah.
So I want to get into the various relationships in this book. There is friendship. I would say sisterhood. There is an interesting dynamic between parents and their children, and an interesting idea that had me thinking about really how much we're like our parents. And as you said a couple of days ago, that we carry our parents with us, whether we like it or not. And that stayed with me. Tell us more about that and how that figures in to Massa
story,
and
yeah.
Katie's story.
Yeah. Well, I think it's so interesting because the two central characters, their mothers are as interesting as they are.
Yeah.
And their mothers have been up against incredible social resistance, particularly to their marriages. But I think that their mothers are in many ways trying to protect their daughters, or at least give their daughters more freedom than they had. And they do that in part by not telling the stories. So the daughters know parts of the stories, but they don't know their whole stories. And I think that the daughters themselves, then Katherine and Massa, they're energetic young women who want to get on with their lives. They want to have their relationships, their children, and they especially want to pursue their music. So for a long time, they're not that interested in their stories, but they are living them because they are inside them.
There is some fear. The young women have some fear and trepidation about the road that lies ahead, but then there's fearlessness and there's hope. And that permeates this novel.
I like the feeling of toughness in a woman. And I like women being able to think about being fearless and sort of stepping into their lives, stepping into the things that they want to do. And I mean, I hadn't put it together with hope, but maybe that stepping into your life is about hope, because you wouldn't do it if you didn't think that you could.
These are two women of mixed race, as you so eloquently displayed. And, you know, when we talk about Toronto in particular, one of the most diverse, multicultural cities in the world, and Canada, and the inclusivity that we tend to enjoy, in reading this and reading the portions that really displayed the racism that abounded and abounds, really,
Yep.
here, it's raw and it's sometimes hard to take, but necessary. And I couldn't help but thinking she's sending a message to her dear readers. She really is, that it's almost a wake-up call. Yes, this is Canada, but Canada is a reflection of the world, and maybe we're not as lily white and clean as we think we are.
Well, I think a lot of these, I think the movement of our social change is slow, and I think it's subtle, and I don't think it's always straight ahead. I think it's sometimes ahead and then steps back,
Yeah.
as we see in our contemporary politics and scenes. There's, just by way of a slightly different example, in the 40s, there was a fantastic band of jazz musicians that was all women, and they were called the International Sweethearts of Rhythm. And this group of women traveled throughout the United States, and they had a very, very powerful presence during the war because all the male musicians were at war. And they were interracial. And so this was really interesting because this group of women, mostly black but some white, were traveling into the South, and it was illegal for those women to perform together. So the white women were instructed to say that their mothers were black and their fathers were white. And they got away with it most of the time, but there was one arrest when one of the women said what she was supposed to say, and the police officer went through her wallet and found a picture of her parents, and it didn't work. So she was imprisoned overnight for that. So we can see, I mean, it's a long, long, long time coming, finding ways to be, equally together. But the music seems to be a way to really meet.
The women speak and basically alternate chapters. So Masa speaks in one chapter, Katherine in another. Why that treatment?
I was interested in telling parallel stories, so stories that had the essential elements of a life, the passion for music, their mother's stories, their own stories, their marriages and lovers, and their children. And these things seem to me, between these two characters, and maybe in a broader sense, to be quite international or quite universal. But I also wanted very much to find the uniqueness of each character. And for me, it worked to have their voices going back and forth. One of my editors once said that she felt that reading the book was like hearing the two of them whisper in each other's ears.
That's a good way to put it.
Very nice.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
I wonder though, because at one point they come together. So two separate stories, but these women do come together in a very unique and wonderful way, and they bond. And I couldn't help, as I was reading the book, I couldn't help but think about them all the time. And I couldn't turn them off. I wanted to know what was going to happen next. So I wonder, in writing them, were you able to put them aside when the writing day was over, or did they stay with you through the process?
I think there's a feeling of what I call backburner when I'm writing, so that yes, you're quite immersed when you're actually doing the writing and working, but when you're doing the other things, the packing of the lunches and the buying of the groceries, they're still there on the back.
They're a combination, I'm sure, these characters, of a bunch of different people. But if there are a couple of words that you would use to describe Katherine, what would they be?
Well, Katherine is fearless and tough and a little bit vulnerable, and she is very much completely absorbed by her music. I mean, she is the artist. She's the character who cannot not play. And she goes to all kinds of lengths to play. She takes buses at night. She leaves her children alone so that she can perform. She does everything to play because she's compelled.
Music is life for
Yes.
Katherine.
Yeah, it's her breath.
It's her breath. And Masa?
And Masa she suffered the loss of her parents at the age of 13, and I think that that's made her a little more vulnerable, and then she has to change countries and cultures. So when she comes to Montreal to study, she's leaving everything she's ever known. So I think she too is driven and absorbed by the music, but not in the same way. Her relationship to her music is a little bit more tempered, and maybe a little bit more vulnerable because she's quite alone in the world.
I would think there's a little bit of an author in every character that they write. Which character do you identify with most? Or is it maybe a combination?
I think it is a
combination.
Yeah.
When you were doing research for this, and I know the travel helped, but even down to the language use and the customs in Pakistan, Afghani customs, and everything, that's extensive research. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that and integrating the research with the creative side of writing.
Well, the research is always lots of fun, and it has become easier and easier over the years with access to all of the communications that we have. So, for example, when I was researching the Pakistan part, I found musicians, former jazz musicians who had played in the 1960s and 70s. And, you know, with a little bit of digging, I was able to be in touch with them on the internet, which, you know, a short while ago would have been impossible. So that part was fabulous. But there's a lot of serendipity and fun in the research. So before I ever dreamed that I would go to Pakistan, I was doing the research, and I chose the Beach Luxury Hotel as the setting for the Pakistan part because I liked the name of the hotel and I liked where it was located, and I knew it was old and historical. And then when I decided to go on the advice of a wonderful poet who said, you know, I think you're getting the Pakistan part, but you probably should visit. There was a lot of organization to do. It's difficult to get a visa to go there, difficult to travel alone as a single woman there. But we found a way to go by visiting the Karachi Literature Festival. And when I was opening the brochures about the Literature Festival online, I saw that it was going to be taking place at no other than the Beach Luxury Hotel. So the gods said you must go. But finding those old jazz musicians in Karachi was fabulous, you know, because there had been no one that had heard their music for 30 years except behind closed doors. And suddenly a stranger from halfway across the world is phoning up and saying, you know, can we visit and will you tell me stories?
It's just fantastic. That's a great,
fabulous.
That's a fantastic story. I'm just thinking we're a couple of days away from International Women's Day. Mm-hmm. And women's rights or lack thereof are on full display in this book. And in particular with Masa, who escapes and ends up in Montreal, only to end up in an arranged marriage. So again, a statement of moving forward, but being pulled back. A comment or two about that as we head into International Women's Day and look of the rights of women here and abroad.
Wow, big question.
Huge.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to do. There's really a great deal to do to solidify and entrench equal rights. In terms of the forward movement and backward movement, there's a very interesting study here in Ontario, for example, by the South Asian Legal Clinic, SALCO it's called. And a few years ago, they did a study on forced marriages in Ontario. And it was a fascinating study. I think the number of people who were surveyed were 219 people. Less than half of those who had been forcibly married were Muslim. The other half were Urdu, Sikh, and Christian. And the other astonishing number from this study was that in the 219 people, 60 different countries were represented. So countries from around the world. So this study shows us that in Ontario, we've got across many religions across 60 different nations, young women and a few young men, there were 3 young men who'd been forcibly married in the study, encountering this, social custom that they were trying to find ways to deal with. So there's lots of work to do.
Indeed, there is.
Yeah.
I want to talk about T Minor, this jazz musician who's the lover, then husband of Katherine. Comes from the South, talks about having to grow up there and then escaping the racism of the South and the Klan and his father's death and everything else. And whether or not you researched that, whether or not you went to the South, or whether there's somebody that you had in mind when you were writing him.
Well, T's story is a compilation of a couple of different real-life characters. And yes, the research was historic research. Yeah. And again, that's not so far in the past.
No, hello, Ferguson.
Yes.
Yeah, no, not so far.
Not far at all.
Not so far at all. And I think this is another one of the wake-up calls. You know, as I turned the pages of the book, it was, and there's another little nugget and another little message that maybe we haven't come as far as we think we have.
Yeah.
The music is at the center of this. And not only at the center of these women's lives, but really on full display when you think about the arts and you think about the importance of them, especially at a time where arts are being cut back in this country. Our kids don't have the opportunity to enjoy the arts as they once did. And yet we see the power of the arts on full display in this book.
Yes, and I chose jazz as the particular form of music because of its restless nature and its history of being an art form that was both oral, but in which performers and composers really know their traditions and really work out of traditions. It is an art form that people pick up together. Not necessarily, it is taught in schools, of course, but it is also an art form that people share in a more oral way. And it is deeply entrenched in a social history of resistance. And I think for that reason, the jazz felt right for this book. But yes, I mean, the arts are critical to our ability to become as whole as we can be.
And to survive. And for these women, it is survival sometimes. It's a thing they grasp onto when everything else is falling apart. And it's like coming home for them, right?
Yeah.
In many ways.
Yeah. And their friendship is nice because there are lots of times when they're separated and they can't get together for whatever reasons, because of their husbands, because of money, because of
Kids.
their children. Yeah. And they pick up the phone and play to each other. There's a period of time of about 3 or 4 years where they just play music over the phone to each other. And I've had that relationship with women, you know, where we can't get out and we talk anyway. We keep connected anyway through the phone.
Who's going to play these characters in the movie?
Yeah.
That's what I kept thinking. Who's going to play them? Because it needs to happen. I know, nods all around, right? No, it really does. Have you ever thought about that?
Oh, that'd be fun, but that's beyond me.
I'll help you out if you need a producer.
Okay.
Just saying. I want to go into another area, and that's the title. And maybe I should have started there, but Underneath the Visible Life. And I think it says so much about what sizzles beneath the surface, right? What's going on. What you see is not everything. Not everything is as it appears to be. And I'm thinking that's what you were getting at. But fill in the blanks for me. When you went about finding a title, and does the title come first? Or does the novel its entirety come first, and do you pick the title after?
Yeah. Titles are difficult, and I have to give full credit to my publisher and editor, Nicole, Wynne, Stanley. She found this title. It was a phrase in the book, So I had different working titles, some as simple as two voices at different points. But it was Nicole who found this title, and I loved it. And I think it really captures so much of what's going on in the book, because we don't know. We often have no idea. And even people that we think we know, we often don't know what's really going on under the surfaces. Sometimes we don't know ourselves. You know, we'll live our lives to a certain point and then see other things that come up from underneath.
Was there a learning process for you as you wrote? Did going through this process and writing these characters, writing this story, teach you a few things about you and who you are?
The way I think is by writing, and I think that that's always been my story. So if I need to think about something, I write, whether it's just jotting or whether it's part of the novel. So yes, I mean, I think writing is my way of thinking, it's my way of growing, and it's my sort of interaction with the world.
You mentioned Nicole Wynne Stanley, who's a fellow Ryerson grad, by the way. And I got this, what I'm holding here, it's the uncorrected and unpublished version of Kim's book, so I got it early to read it. And Nicole, the president and publisher that Kim just mentioned, wrote a note in it. And I just want to read a little portion, okay? Because I went, oh, look, Nicole, and then read it. But I loved what she said. She says, as an editor, you encounter books to which you become deeply connected. And then there are those books that you become so close to that you almost feel as though they are part of you. I'm thrilled to share with you one such rare book. And then I'm going to skip down. She says, I can't resist, and this is one of my favorite scenes, I can't resist sharing one scene from the novel that has stayed with me ever since I read the very first draft. Katherine, who you've heard about, an exhausted single mother, has just returned home with groceries and is listening to John Coltrane's My Favorite Things for the very first time. So strong is her need to be immersed in the music that when her children begin taking eggs out of the carton she left on the floor and breaking them one by one, she simply lets them so that she can listen uninterrupted again and again and again. Haven't so many of us been there? And I said, amen to that. I did, because busy mom, you know, trying to do it all, not doing it all well, hanging on by a thread, but there's music or there's something, that thing that you just hang on to. Yeah. That right there, I think, speaks to so many women and men for that, where you just have something, that bit of solace, and it doesn't matter what's going on everywhere else and all the stuff that's happening, you just cleave onto that. Yeah. Tell me about writing that.
Well, for me, it's writing. Right.
For you, it's writing.
You know, well, Sarah's here, and she's really, really mature now. But there were times when she was.
I was wondering, Sarah.
When she was doing stuff, and I was finishing a sentence. But the breaking eggs story that is taken from real life, and it was I was talking with a friend who had twins, and we really wanted to chat about something. She was painting, and she wanted to tell me what she was doing, and we'd been talking for quite a long time. And I said, and her twins were little, and I said, what are your kids doing? And she said, they're breaking the eggs, and I'm letting them because I want to finish this conversation.
I knew it. I read that and thought, this is real life. This came from somewhere. This is real life for sure.
Yep.
I said earlier that you're humble, and I know, although I met you a couple days ago for the first time, and I say this because the accolades have been rolling in, not just for this, but for others. The third book, of course, The Disappeared, and everything else. But you said to me a couple of days ago, it really does come down to the writing. It's not really, the accolades are great and the reviews are great, but it comes down to sitting there in that room, I think is what you said, and putting pen to paper or typing, doing whatever it is you do, and that connection. Are you pleased with what you've given the world so far?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I am pleased, and I'm pleased at the chance to do it. There, you know, I've had the chance to be able to do these things, and it's immensely satisfying.
Do you have to kind of immerse yourself in one book before you can think about another?
Yes, I like to read widely, but I do stay with one project at a time, one book at a time. Yeah. Otherwise, the characters will get mixed
Well,
up.
this is what I'm wondering, and I'm wondering if there might be a part 2 to this.
Oh, maybe.
Because when I finished it, I was hoping that maybe you were thinking about some sort of sequel.
Interesting. I hadn't thought of it.
Can you please write? Can you please write a sequel? I think question. Yes, I can see Yvonne getting a little bit closer.
Yeah.
What we wanted to do at this point is open the floor to you, and if you have any questions at all, we'd love to hear them. Thank you so much. We'd love to hear them. You feel free to come up to the mic and ask them.
Kim, we hear a lot about the various novels, and nobody seems to go back to Dagmar's Daughter, which totally blew me away. I love that novel. Is there an opportunity to kind of bring it back or get it out there again or something? Because it's an amazing novel.
Thank you, Alan. Alan's my friend. And yeah, I don't know, maybe I'll do some reading from it or something.
You should.
It's also a mother-daughter story, so, yeah.
Hi, Kim.
Hi.
I was just formulating the question in my head, and that's why I didn't jump up earlier. So I'm really looking forward to your next book. In addition to the richness of the stories and the depth of the characters and the voices, there does seem to be, as Marci mentioned earlier, this kind of undercurrent of music that goes through your books. I don't know if novels have soundtracks, but if they do, yours certainly has a jazz soundtrack to it. Songwriters are often asked which comes first, the lyrics or the music. I'm wondering, for a novelist, what comes first, the characters or the plot?
Oh, interesting question.
That's interesting.
Yes. In my case, I think it's the characters. I tend to see a character, start to hear the things they're interested in and how they speak, and the plot seems to come after. But I teach creative writing, and I know that people work very differently, and I have seen lots of students who will come in with their complete plot mapped out before they've written a word. So I always envy those people because it's hard to write plots. But I think people work in different ways, but for me it's character.
Please.
I'm always interested in authors who really pursue writing inside different characters who are so different from themselves, specifically sort of crossing race, crossing nationality, and I'm curious what your personal approach to that is.
Well, I think I start more with story than with race or culture or religion or many of the things that have come out particularly in this book. So that, for example, in this book I started with these laws that I found quite shocking when I first read about them. And then the characters came to me as a result of what characters would have been interacting with those laws. So I think in this case it was almost as if the themes were defining who would be the actors in the story. Good question, interesting.
I'm really interested to know what would I have had to have done in the 50s and 60s to be classified as incorrigible?
Not much. Do you remember those signs, ladies' entrances to taverns?
Yes.
Did you ever go in the other door?
No, my mother talked about that issue, but I never had to face it. I was just all over that. But going in the wrong door and going out with more than 2 men in a week?
Maybe, if they knew. Women actually got arrested for playing cards in front of their children. That was considered incorrigible. Not coming home on time was considered incorrigible. not making your father's curfew. I mean, it wasn't so widely used in the 60s, but before.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a very, very sweeping law.
I had never heard of that.
And very subjective. There's an excellent book written by Velma Demerson called Incorrigible. And it's her story of her encounter with that law. It's fascinating.
Good. I just had one question about your process. You talk about character. What I always think of, some authors say that they start with an image and they just work around. They have no idea where the story's going, and it takes 2 or 3 years. They put it together, and then stuff works. And then there's the people who come in with the plot.
Yeah.
So where are you on that continuum? Or do you have a typical process?
I think I work quite associatively, so I'll get an image, a couple of ideas, a character, and then the plot seems to come a little later for me.
Okay, so you're that way. Okay, thank you.
Great questions.
Yes.
I want to thank you so much. You've been wonderful. Thank you for the questions, and thank you for being so attentive. And thank you. What a pleasure.
Thank you.
What a pleasure. Thank you, Kim. Thanks.